Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking
Yeah.
through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month. And we totally recommend it.
Yes, get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. Anita, guess what?
What?
I have started doing online therapy.
Okay, you told me about this. You're doing it with betterhelp.com, right?
I sure am.
Tell me more about it. How does it work?
Okay, so I filled out a questionnaire and then I was matched to a therapist really quickly, like within 24 hours, and we were already communicating.
Ooh, how do the sessions actually work? Is it video conferencing or what?
Yes, you can do video conferencing, you can do a phone call, or you can use the allotted time to instant message with your therapist. So say you're not feeling really great about speaking and you would prefer messaging, or you're in a place where you can't speak, you can still do your sessions there.
Interesting.
It's kind of awesome.
So how's it been going?
It's been going really great. I love how easy it is to communicate and how it's not dependent on where I live and where the therapist lives in order to help me with my needs, like with my grief stuff or anxiety or whatever. So I feel like it's a really great service, and I think that other people should do it.
So, Mel, obviously you've done lots of therapy in the past. So how does this compare to those experiences?
I am such a fan of this online therapy, I have to tell you, because I didn't have to find a therapist and hope that it worked out. I don't have to pay $150 per session, and I don't have to drive an hour to my session and then an hour back. I'm a big fan. It's very convenient.
It sounds like a great idea, especially during a pandemic. It sounds like a great idea anytime, but especially right now when people are stuck inside their house, or if people just don't want to drive because they're lazy like you.
Totally. Or if people have 4 kids like you and they want to die.
Totally true. So we're really excited because we have a new partnership with BetterHelp.com, and our listeners can get 10% off of their first month of counseling if they sign up at, what's the website, Mel?
Try BetterHelp, HELP.com/WWDN, which stands for What Do We Do Now?
Amazing. I am thinking that I should sign up too, Mel, and see if it's going to work out great for me like it's working out great for you.
Yeah, and you know what's awesome? They do individual therapy, they do family therapy, and couples therapy.
Well, couples therapy, yeah.
So when you and I get in a fight, our first widow-wife fight, we can go to BetterHelp and get a session. And just a reminder, this is not a crisis line, and it's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online.
That sounds great.
BetterHelp is available for clients worldwide, and you can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. Widowing is hard, and not widowing is hard. Everybody needs better mental health. Start living a happier life today. And remember, our listeners get a 10% discount off their first month. And again, the link is trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. Happy widowing! Perfect.
How's it going?
It's going.
Yeah.
Trying to think if anything exciting has happened. Nothing
exciting has happened. We've had a lot of exciting stuff here.
Yes, I think we should talk about what's happening with you because you have a very exciting thing.
Yeah, I've had a couple of exciting things. So remember how a couple weeks ago, it's been a long time, we talked about the magazine cover contest, and then we had the photo shoot. Well, the magazine came out, and I got it in the mail a couple days ago, and it's pretty amazing, I gotta say.
You looked so fancy. I saw a little picture of it.
Yeah. It's like a 3-page article, so it's pretty legit. It's not just like a blurb. It's pretty cool. But the tricky thing is that nobody can read it because all the bookstores are closed, so nobody can get a copy of it.
Of course. And this magazine is called Triathlete?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Now, I asked a triathlon friend about this magazine, and I told her that you were on it, and her mouth dropped open. So apparently it's very fancy in your world, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the magazine.
Is it like the same as Rolling Stone for musicians?
I don't think I can go that far because like Rolling Stone is iconic, you know. Triathlete is maybe not the Rolling Stone. So, sorry, well, Triathlete magazine.
I mean, Anita and Mick Jagger. You know,
we're pretty much synonymous.
Well, that's very exciting. You should post about it on the Instagram. Anything else?
Yes,
that's
I have
exciting.
The most amazing story also that I want to tell you. Can I tell you?
Yeah.
Okay, so my grandpa, who's 90 years old, he is like this old cowboy, okay? He still works every day. He has a little gas station, but it pumps no gas. He does like safety inspections. And up until recently, he rode his horse to work every day, but his horses got too old. So
his horse.
Yeah, his horses went blind, and so he can't ride them. But he's not too old to ride them. They got too old. So he started getting sick last week, and it was like, oh no, right? This is not the time to be 90 years old and get pneumonia. So he ended up going to get tested for COVID, and his test came back negative, but he did have pneumonia. So that was kind of scary, but he was mad that they wanted him to stay home from work because he just thinks you should go to work no matter what. Well, he got into this coughing fit and ended up coughing up a pea.
Ew.
Like the vegetable. Out of his lungs. So he had inhaled a pea a few weeks ago, and it was just down there hanging around, and he complained about it, and I was like, no, he has it. It's in a Kleenex. He can prove it. And his pneumonia is getting better now.
So he had a pea, the vegetable, stuck in his lung.
Isn't that crazy?
That is a new one.
I know. And then, so they had to admit him to the hospital. And while he was in the hospital, he pushed the code blue button in his own hospital room, which is not that easy to do. It's not like it's on the hospital bed, or it's like up above the top of the bed where it's not easy for a patient to reach. But he was trying to turn on his TV and he couldn't figure it out. And so he like got out of bed and was pushing all the buttons he could find and pushed the code blue button. So like the whole hospital comes running for a code blue button. And he was like, oh, I was just trying to turn on the TV. So.
I have something sort of exciting, but it doesn't have to do with me.
What?
It has to do with us.
What?
As you know, whenever you have a podcast, you have podcast hosting, and usually the podcast hosting gives you analytics on where your listeners are from.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The exciting thing is that we have 3 countries besides the U.S. that are almost tied at the same amount of listeners. Don't ask me how many because I don't remember. But
wow.
The countries are the UK and Australia and Canada are basically tied for the same amount of listens. So we're going to have a contest. Anita doesn't know about this, but if in the next week or two, your country can double the amount of listens that we have, Anita is going to perform for you your national anthem on the clarinet.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I'm going to have to practice.
So there you go.
Who has the easiest national anthem? I don't know what Australia's national anthem is.
I think they're probably all about the same, and you're I don't either. Sorry, guys, no offense.
Ooh.
You know England's.
Yeah, and Canada's.
Okay.
Okay, let's do it. It sounds super fun.
I'm Mel.
I'm Anita, and we're just a couple of young widows trying to figure out widow we do now.
Except for today, we are trying to figure out widower we do now.
Yeah. So today is an exciting day. We have another guest today, and this guest is another first for us. Well, actually, it's 2 firsts. And this is kind of fun because for most of our guests, either Mel or I have had some sort of connection to them, except for our first guest. We didn't know her at all. And this is the same with our guest today. And if you haven't figured it out, our guest is a widower, so a male. And he is coming to us from... Where are you coming to us from?
I'm coming from England. Watford in England. So for those who don't know, it's just outside London.
From England. Okay.
Welcome. Yes. And would you like to say your name?
David. Mm-hmm.
Well, welcome. We are really glad to have you. And it's pretty late there for you. We have quite a significant time difference.
Just a tad. Yeah. It's coming up to half 11 at night now for me. So.
Yes. So David has really put himself out on a limb, staying up super late so that he can accommodate our recording schedule. So thank you so much. I hope you have had all the caffeine.
Thank you for having me.
We had to use our brains for this podcast. There was a conversion chart. There was Googling. It was more effort than we've had to do yet, but I'm pretty proud of us that we have figured it out. And here we are.
You get the gold star.
So, David, do you want to introduce yourself to us a little bit? Tell us a little bit about you and who you are. Sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts, and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Sure. Some people may, if they're international listeners, may recognize that my accent is not a London accent. So I'm originally from, although I live in Watford now, I'm originally from Belfast, Northern Ireland. So I moved to Watford quite a few years ago, back in around about the year 1997 or thereabouts. And I had lived in Ayr for a while. I met my wife in 2002, and it does seem like ages ago. And that was probably a bit unusual at the time because it was through a dating website, which I know you've got sort of all the various different dating apps now, and swipe left and swipe right and whatever. This was probably a bit more, a little bit newer then. I was 31 at the time. My wife was a few years older, and I thought well, it wasn't quite midlife crisis at 31, but I thought I'd give this internet dating thing a go because I was having no success in other ways, and tried it. And to be honest, I didn't like it. Some scary people out there, probably still is, and so I pretty much give up on it. And I think I was letting my subscription expire, and this email came through from some lady, and just sort of it sort of went from there. A few messages, and after a couple of weeks of sort of messages and that, and some phone calls and that, we sort of went out for a date, and we just clicked. So guess what? 6 months later, I moved in with her and her stepdaughter, who was 10 at the time, or my stepdaughter, her daughter, who was 10 at the time, and I suppose I'll sort of say that I hadn't sort of set out to necessarily to meet anybody with kids, but I suppose you're at that age and people have had marriages and that, so it's just one of those things. And for me, it was a case of her daughter was part of the package, so that was cool. So that was all fine. We got married, 2005, and following year, our son was born. And I mean, I guess life was fine, was normal. As a family of four, my wife, she worked in local government. I worked as a quality manager in a telecoms company. So some days I was away, and other days I was maybe just in the local office. And I guess it was just normal in inverted commas at that point. Then if we fast forward quite a bit, I suppose 2014, in late autumn or fall, she sort of developed some symptoms, went to her doctor, and this was sort of went back and forth a few times. No real improvement with some medication he'd given her, and sort of no change in the real symptoms. So he basically referred her to a specialist. And I suppose we're in, by the time we sort of saw the specialist now, it was sort of like February the following year, so that's 2015. And that's when we sort of totally unexpected got the and rather bluntly, actually, I think, from recollection, the specialist said, we've found a lump, and it's cancer. It was colorectal cancer, quite a sort of a rare form. So that basically became that was a real out of the blue sort of shock. I mean, my wife was 46 at the time, so young, fit, healthy, and that was not expected to happen at that age. So I mean, her symptoms had sort of gradually sort of been worsening. So I suppose around this point, I sort of became her caregiver, or carer, as we call them. She was taking time off home, and our time off work, and sort of staying at home. My stepdaughter, she'd moved out of the house the year before, so it was just the three of us, my son and my wife, at home. And I guess it was then a case of, well, she had to have some surgery, and was basically just on a treatment plan. From the information we got from the doctors, the prognosis was good. She was young, healthy. It was quite the cisplatin, the drug that they were going to use, was was sort of quite well for treating this type of cancer. She was young, fit, healthy, so prognosis was good. Between some chemo drugs and some radiotherapy. So the good thing was, I guess, for me, from work point of view, my work made adjustments, so I was just able to work from home pretty much the whole time. Occasionally, maybe having to pop in for a meeting in the office or whatever. So that just made, from the caregiving point of view, made it sort of less stressful for me. And I guess after sort of surgery and through the chemo treatment that she was on, a pretty heavy drug regime. But the good thing was, as we saw with although chemo's a horrible thing with all the stuff that it does to you, it seemed to be helping because the pain medication she was taking was gradually going down. So that seemed, quite sort of fruitful, that it was having a positive effect. So we come to, well, I think she did six bites of chemo. So we're now moving into, I guess, probably the fall of the following year, so 2016, from when she first had problems, and had just finished all the treatment, and suddenly then we had another spanner thrown in the works, where and I'm sure there's people out there who they sort of get this, and it's when you're saying all the treatment away, but she developed peripheral neuropathy as a side effect of the drug, and she developed it quite bad. I mean, she couldn't feel from her knees down. There was very little sensation, and in her hands, she had very little sensation. So that was one of the things. Okay, right. Well, you have the shock of sort of dealing with that, and then there's a case of, right. Okay, well, we reconfigure. It's, I guess you sort of see it's worth it. If the cancer drugs are sort of working that well, and the cancer sort of tumor seems to be shrinking, then it's going to be worth it, and we'll adjust this. And I suppose you get used to that sort of battle as well. Although I must admit, it was difficult. I mean, I mean, physically, she'd been bedridden a lot of the time. The treatment sort of then seemed to sort of alleviate that somewhat. She was a bit more mobile, and then to have this thrown at her again, she was very unsteady on her feet. I mean, she likened it to walking. What was it she said? It was like walking on top of woolly sheep, wearing thick fur-lined slippers. It was just really sort of, you can feel something sort of there, but no real sort of detail. So she was, quite sort of clumsy on her feet, and the hands, obviously. I mean, for me personally, holding hands is a big thing. So she couldn't hold my hand the way that she would normally hold it, because it didn't feel right for her. So she, had to hold my hand differently, and that was something, I guess. It was just, I've always been somebody who's held hands. My parents always done that. So I guess it was a big thing to sort of suddenly lose that, and the fact that she didn't really want to hold hands anymore because of the sensation that it caused. But we moved into Christmas that year, I guess, sort of quite sort of hopeful. The things seemed to be positive, and I guess we were waiting then come early January what would happen with the next scan, just to sort of see what was going on. So when January came, it was a big shock then when they said, actually, we never quite knew whether it was the original tumor had regrown again, or whether it was the fact that it was another tumor had formed, but it was back one way or another. And the difficulty we had now was that the drug that they used before, cisplatin, they couldn't use again because of the peripheral neuropathy damage that it caused. So that would be cumulative. So they had to try and figure out another drug that they could use and try and use that. So we had to wait a while until they sort of get that figured out. In the meantime, her pain levels were increasing again. So we knew it was growing, it was spreading. We have a local hospice in Watford. She checked into it temporarily to sort of get some pain management sort of done with regards to medication. Whilst we're waiting for chemo, we started on the new drug, and I guess we were fingers crossed, hopeful, and all that it was going to work. I guess then, over the next sort of couple of months, we found out it wasn't working. Her pain level was increasing. Symptoms were sort of worsening, and after sort of going back into hospital again for some tests and that, they basically said, look, there's nothing more that we can do. So at that point, it was a case of, we contacted the hospice again that she'd been in just about sort of 8 weeks prior. And said, were there any beds free and whatever. So we managed to get into the hospice again. And basically, we were there for about 2.5 weeks or so. Thankfully, at that point, I stopped work. I sort of took time off work, took my son out of the school. And thankfully, we were able to get the family room that the hospice had. So we were able to stay in the hospice and basically spend all our time with my wife. My mother had come over from Belfast at that point, so she was there for support. We just tried with what was left to make it as much sort of quality time as possible. The staff at the hospice were wonderful. I'm trying to having that difficult conversation with your with any child is horrible, but they give us as much support as we could, and they sort of were actively engaging with my son. The chef at the hospice actually, because they found out that my wife and my son did a lot of cooking together, making cookies, cupcakes, stuff like that. They sort of looked to try and sort of help that out and give him something to do. So he actually helped to sort of make some stuff in the kitchen, which he absolutely loved, to make some cookies and cupcakes for the inpatients that were there at the time. So they were really great. I couldn't say a bad thing about them. But I guess then it's come up to almost 4 years now. Later this month, that then she passed away in the hospice. So we were all present at the time. And I guess that's when, as you both know, life changes.
Yeah.
And that was a case of, I took some time off for more time off work. My son wanted to go back to school, so I let him go back to school. I had a bit more time off work. And then basically just tried to, after some time off, get back into the swing again, and take on the parental mantle of being the sole parent now.
So how old was your son when all of this was going on?
He was, when my wife was diagnosed, he was 9, so he was 10 then when she died.
So the time between her diagnosis and her passing was about how long?
I guess from diagnosis to passing, it was probably about 14 months thereabouts.
Okay.
Over
a year.
The symptoms had been around for a little bit longer, but about 14 months or so.
It's so interesting. How did he respond to your wife's diagnosis?
Well, and this was the not good. And the thing was, my dad had died of cancer just about 3 years 2 years before, and of course, his first, at that age, you hear the word cancer, and however the first experience goes is how you probably view cancer. So his first experience of cancer was, oh, somebody died. So we were, very aware that, right, okay, look, trying to explain to him that cancer is different. It's one word, but it's many different things. And, we were trying to sort of give him other examples of stories of where people, had got through cancer, had got through treatment. And, we said, we were open and honest with them. For me with kids, it's a case of trying to put it into terms they can understand, language they can understand, as opposed to hiding stuff from them, because I think long term that doesn't help. That causes problems further down the line. So yeah, I guess it was a case of it was a hard conversation, a difficult conversation. But I think, I suppose for all of us, when she was going through treatment, once it started and things seemed to be improving, I guess you don't forget it, but it sort of gives you, you see positive signs, so you feel better about it.
I just think it's really interesting because I can put myself in that position, and it's hard to explain to a child the seriousness of the situation, but also the hope that you might feel in that situation, because it's like you were saying, he'd had an experience with cancer, and so he assumed that if you had cancer, you were going to die, right? So it's kind of like trying to explain things are really going to change. This is scary, but also it doesn't mean like mom's going to die tomorrow. And it sounds like when you got the diagnosis that you were expecting her to be cured. It sounds like the prognosis was really positive in the beginning. So, and I actually, so with my own cancer situation, I didn't really talk to my kids about it very much because I didn't want them to jump to that conclusion of like, mom's going to die. You know what I'm saying? But it was a little bit of a different situation because there was really no chance that was going to happen. And I figured at that point in time we could switch the conversation. But I didn't want them to go there. So I was a little bit less honest with my kids about that. Like, they'd be like, oh, yeah, what? I'm going to the doctor right now. I got to go to the, the cancer doctor. I'm just going to the doctor, because it's a tricky tightrope to walk, I feel like, with kids. But did you also find that it just kind of became part of his normal, because that's just what life is for him?
Yeah, and I guess for me it was a case, and my wife, it was a case of trying to keep things as normal as possible. And have, children like routine. They need routine, and so to be able to sort of try and give him some kind of normality, as best possible. My wife, did spend an awful lot of time stuck in the bedroom, and I guess it was a case of I basically give, once I'd sort of got my work out of the way during the day and obviously was tending to her needs, evening time was basically time that I made for them two to spend together. So I'd be off sort of, I'd make the dinner, I'd be sort of doing everything else, getting on with stuff, and just let the two of them spend a few hours together, watching stuff on TV, watching, I know, was it Pioneer Woman? Yeah, because my wife was into cooking, whatever. So she, they used to watch a lot of that stuff, and they just spent an awful lot of time together. And I know, and maybe I'm sort of going ahead of one of the other questions, because obviously listening to the podcast, this thing around, slow or sort of or prolonged death or whatever. I don't think there's any. Neither of those options are good, but I suppose what I can appreciate in having, the situation that we had was that actually it allowed, at least the positive I try and hold on to, was that it allowed my son and my wife and I suppose my stepdaughter to have more time to do certain things. At the time, of course, we didn't know what was around the corner, but at least actually I take something from the fact that that last 14 months or so, they spent an awful lot of time together.
David, how old was your stepdaughter at the time of your wife's passing? Do you remember?
I remember. Let's see. So, um, early 20s. I'll say that much. I can
Okay.
forget about that.
So, does your stepdaughter and your son, do they have a good relationship? I know it's a big difference in age. My sister and I are 9 years apart, which is big, but are your son and your stepdaughter a wider gap than that? But so I know it's kind of just like two separate lives, but are they in each other's lives still? And is there a good support system between those two?
Yeah. No, lockdown at the moment. We can't do it. Normally, you know, once a week she'll come round. We'll sit, have a coffee and stuff like that, have a chat for a few hours. And he looks forward to it. I mean, we all look forward to it on a Tuesday. I suppose we've been doing it virtually now, over Zoom. And I guess at the moment we're just waiting for normal services to resume so that we can do it face to face again. But yeah, I mean, they are really close.
Oh, that's good.
I was going to ask, so you're just, in a different country, and so the infrastructure is different and the healthcare system is different. So you talked about there being like a hospice home. Do you guys have like an in-home hospice options as well? Or if you're doing hospice, you go to the hospice place, the hospice home?
There are options if you do want to sort of to have hospice care at home. I guess for us, because we already had a relationship, we knew some of the people in the hospice from the few weeks that my wife had been in earlier in the year to get some pain medication adjusted. We were quite happy to go back. Well, not happy, if you get what I mean. But
Yeah.
it was somewhere that we knew that and so therefore it was comfortable to go back there and I guess. I suppose I never really thought of options for it at home, but that seemed to be just sort of the logical place to do it because we knew the staff there, we knew the care they give, and the standard in that. And I suppose the other thing was actually, it was familiar to my son as well. He liked that environment as much as I mean it was weird because it was strange. I mean, I remember at the time when we first thought, okay, she's going to have to go in and get the pain meds sorted out at the hospice. It was like, oh my goodness me, oh hospice, oh. And actually, when we went there, it was just so vastly different from what you picture in your mind. I mean, it's a yeah, sure, we all know what happens there, but it's just the amount of care, attention. It's almost sort of. It's so peaceful. I mean, probably like many other hospices, they make the grounds very sort of warm, receptive, sort of nature-like and peaceful and tranquil and that. So I guess going back to it, it was actually, for my son, it was sort of something familiar. He enjoyed there. He, messed around with the staff and stuff like that. So yeah, it seemed good to be able to go there for a lot of reasons than say perhaps come back and try and manage things at home.
Plus, they had a chef, and there's no chef at your house, right? So it seems like a good option. I'd go anywhere with a chef.
No, I mean, I guess that was one thing. I'm happy with is the fact that actually I can cook and bake.
That is a plus.
I've had some few problems over the weeks because I mean I normally bake bread on at least a weekly basis, and I've been trying to find flour over the past sort of several weeks. In fact, probably months have been challenging, but I've managed to get some, so we can get back in. That's part of my therapy is baking bread.
Has there been a shortage of yeast where you are? Because I know there has been around here for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Who is hoarding it? Who has it? Do you think the Great British Bake Off is hoarding all the yeast and all the flour? What do you think, David?
I think there's an awful lot of people who, well, let's put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised, because it literally overnight. I mean, nobody. I mean, I could walk into any supermarket, find as much flour, different types of bread, flour, and yeast, whatever that I wanted every week. And overnight, literally, it was a case of, I I can't get anything. And it was like, and it was really frustrating because I do this all the time. I bake all the time, and nobody else has been showing any interest whatsoever. And then suddenly everybody's hoarding the blooming stuff. And it's like I couldn't get it, and I'm not, I'm doing this because actually I prefer to make my own bread than buy it, as opposed to, oh, I've got nothing else to do, I'll bake some bread.
It's Mary Berry. I know she's out there buying all of the flour.
Yep, they're like recording new episodes in quarantine with all of the flour and the yeast. Is baking something that you started before your wife passed away, or have you done it since as a form of therapy?
It was, I suppose, between, my wife, I baked the bread, my wife baked the cakes and stuff like that. So it's something we done before, and certainly there was an awful lot of time, younger years with my son that she would bake stuff, and we'd sort of take it to, we'd give stuff to neighbors. We'd had like a sort of a cupcake sale and stuff like that in my son's primary school, or I'm trying to remember what's that, elementary school is it, or whatever in the States, and sort of, so we'd do stuff like that, and whereas I was the one who would tend to do the bread, so she was a bit more artistic, I was a bit more into flavor combinations with bread and stuff like that. So I basically, I suppose, I fell out of it for a while afterwards, lost interest, and then sort of got back into it again. And I suppose, I don't have the skills that my wife had at baking. I can Christmas cakes, haven't done those for years, but I can do stuff like that. But bread's more my forte, and coming up with weird flavor combinations and stuff like that.
What's the weirdest?
Weirdest?
Go away. Sure.
Well,
sorry.
Those are Anita's kids. Everybody, sorry. We're not trying to be rude to David.
I was just yelling, "Go away!" to David and Mel. Just kidding. Stay here. Tell us your story.
Go away. Yeah, I want to hear the weird combinations.
Weird combinations. I suppose the combinations I do, the main one I do at the moment, it's not necessarily weird, but I do a peanut butter and banana bread.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's not like that's a proper sort of bread, as opposed to, say, some of the cake-like stuff that you tend to get when people do it with banana bread. So that's the thing mostly at the moment. My son loves that, especially toasted. But I don't. Well, do you two know? Have you heard of Marmite? I don't know if that's in the States or not.
I've heard of it, but I've never eaten it.
So it's,
what is it? What's the word?
Marmite. It's an acquired
Marmite
taste.
It sounds like a parasite.
It's a yeast extract. So it's
like nutritional yeast, isn't it? And like in a spread form.
And some people like it, and some people absolutely loathe it. But it's maybe a sort of a bit like an umami type taste. Very sort of savory taste, but very intense. But I've done sort of Marmite and cheese bread. Again, it's not everybody would like it, but I suppose it's just some of those weird flavors. And I also will put in stuff like chipotle chili, because I love chilies. So smoked paprika and chipotle.
Everybody, let David have some flour and some yeast. Stop buying it all so he can get back to his normal bread making procedures.
He needs them. He's been going the long haul, doing the bread forever. All of you hoarders, give it back to him. He's earned it.
Back away.
Yes. Especially because he's a widower. Now, David, after your wife passed away, will you explain a little bit of what your life was like? You've listened to our podcast, so you know kinds of the things that we ask. But what was helpful right after she died? How were things with you and your son? Like, can you just explain kind of that early grief period for you guys?
So, I guess the is it interesting thing? I don't know, maybe not. But I guess the thing for me was that actually from a bereavement point of view, I have been a volunteer with a bereavement charity for at the point at which my wife passed away. That was about sort of 10 years. So I actually, I'm a volunteer. Well, we don't use the term counselor, but I have counseling skills. So I've supported sort of bereaved individuals over the years. So I guess for me, I sort of knew to a certain extent what was ahead. And I say to a certain extent because it's one of those things, until you go through it, you can never necessarily fully appreciate it. And as much as you think you can prepare yourself for it, you can't really when it hits. So I guess what helped me, I mean, my training helped. I always say to people, it was not a get out of jail free card. It didn't mean I could bypass all the pain or anything like that. Didn't mean I didn't suffer from widow brain and the fog of grief and stuff like that. But what helped me was, I suppose, knowing that it was a normal process, that the given time and having a support network and stuff like that, gradually things would change. So that sort of that helped me. I guess the other thing, I suppose, I've always been a talker. I don't know if that comes across from how much I talk here, but I've been a talker and a listener. So I've always been emotionally, is it emotionally intelligent, whatever they say, and emotionally aware. So people would come and talk to me over the years, and that's maybe part of why I sort of volunteered. But also, I knew the value of talking. So it was a little bit difficult, I suppose, being a male. Most of your male friends don't want to do all that emotional stuff. But thankfully, I had one or two male friends who were willing to talk about it. So I could, connect with them and talk about stuff. So having that support network where there were people I could go to, I wanted to talk about this aspect, whether it was, say, parenting, or I wanted to talk about, bereavement, because I was also part of a bereaved carers or caregivers network. So I guess I had, in my support network, you're not going to have a one-stop shop where you can turn to one single person and get everything. So I just sort of tried to get different things from different people. But certainly talking, I knew, helped me. I did have a bit of counselling at the hospice at the time. That I was only 6 sessions. Even though I knew the process, even though I'd sort of sat on the other seat over the years, I guess it's still unusual sort of going through it. But that helped initially to get some stuff. And I suppose the other thing that helped was actually trying to connect with other widows or widowers, although it turned out it was mostly widows that I found on a Facebook group. There's a charity over here called Widowed and Young. So anybody who's widowed from the age of 50 or under can join it. So I was able to make a few connections there and actually just have some face-to-face connections with the people who could get it. And I think that's the thing is, talking to other people who get it. Obviously, you two know that does help to normalize things that somebody else sort of gets. Obviously, grief. Everybody's grief experience is unique to them. The bereavements and the relationship is unique to them. But to have somebody else who you can talk to, who can sort of sit alongside you, understand it, and sort of connect with it, that helps. That's the bit where the muggles, as I call them, the non-bereaved, they don't get it, and they'll compare. Oh yes, I know what it's like because I'm separated, I'm divorced, or whatever, and it's like it's absolutely nothing the same.
Yeah.
I love that, calling them muggles. That's really funny.
Yeah.
And can we just for a second, can I just gripe about the fact that it seems like all the men die and leave all of the women behind? Because what is the deal with that? Why is it like mostly widows and then like just a few widowers? I'm guessing that just men are weaker. Sorry, David. I didn't mean to say that out loud. But it's true. It's like way more widows than widowers. I think even like statistically that's true. So
And I think also, actually, I suppose, I mean, I've tried to do a lot of reading of stuff out there, since my wife died, just to understand other people's experience and sort of see if I can draw anything from it and whatever. And there's so much out there from book-wise, from a female perspective, but actually very less, and out there from a male perspective. Although there's been a few sort of more, how should we say, celebrity bereavements that I'm aware of, and a few individuals over here in the UK have done some books, like Rio Ferdinand, the Manchester United ex defender. His wife died, so he's done some TV programs and that, talking about his experience, and done a book. So yeah, it's strange how, I mean, there's more of a message coming out now about the male perspective, which is different, and it's different because males are different, but it's also different, I think, because males have different needs as a widowed individual compared to to a female.
Yeah, I actually have thought about this sometimes too, and I think that in some ways it would be harder to be a widower just because of society's expectations of grief as well. Like, it's acceptable, for me to be crying in the grocery store, but it's not really acceptable for a man to be doing that. And also, you think about, as far as working and things like that, you got to get back to work, you got to provide for your family. And there's like this expectation that you've got to, get right back to it. And there doesn't seem to be the same societal expectations for a woman who's lost her husband. So I'm not saying that like it's great to be a widow, but I do think that there's some more complicating factors in what's expected of you as a male who's lost their spouse.
I remember, actually, this is before Scott passed away, because he's the one that told me about this article, and I am sorry that I don't have the article or the specifics, but what I remember from it is he was saying that there are, of course, studies about men and emotional behavior or emotional needs, and the reason why men are more prone to suicide is because they don't have the same support systems as women do. Like, I mean, David, you luckily know that it's good to talk, and you've been in that kind of bereavement community before, but for, a societal, like, kind of like average Joe sort of a guy, maybe they're just like, well, we don't talk about this. Like, my buddies and I, we get together and we just hang out, or we watch the game, and like, we just don't talk personal stuff. So, I mean, I think and that article I remember was not even about anything having to do with like a widower or anything. It's just like guys in general, why their emotional health has been declining, and they isolate more and more and more. And so, I mean, to be a guy already, then to be a widower on top of that doesn't have a support community, or know that it's healthy to talk, or have the propensity to talk. That sounds like really very difficult.
Yeah, I think, I mean, and that's what they say, statistically, men, widowers are more likely to remarry sooner than widows, essentially because in a relationship, a man gets that emotional connection then with his spouse, and that's why, in part, because he doesn't get that from his friends, from the male friends, that's in part why they're more likely to remarry, to be able to have that emotional aspect within the relationship, whereas because generally, and it's all stereotypes, somewhat, but I suppose there's always an element of truth somewhere, but because women do tend to have more of an emotional network of friends who they can talk to about stuff, they don't quite need that same sort of emotional connection from a single individual, because they've already got that in their network. So I suppose that's why I think they say men statistically tend to remarry quicker as widows than women. And then certainly, I mean, mental health, mental well-being is a big thing over here. Over the past few years, there's been a lot of emphasis on that 25 to 45 age group or whatever, and men are statistically more likely to commit suicide. So yeah, I guess, and it's this thing about talking, which of course stereotypically men haven't done, because it's all these phrases of man up, and sort of you can't show any emotion, you can't do tears. You know, you're meant to be rock solid in everything that's thrown at you. Yeah, which brings its own challenges. But I suppose, I mean, I'm fortunate enough, I don't know, to sort of, you know, to realize actually there's more than that. I mean, I for me, you know, people see, oh, crying is a sign of weakness. For me, actually, I just see it as a strength, because certainly from the work that I do, to be able to sort of talk about your grief, about the pain, and everything else that goes with it, that takes courage, that takes strength to actually throw yourself into it, to embrace it, to hold it, and to sit and dwell in it, as opposed to running away from it, hiding it, suppressing it, locking it under, you know, in a treasure chest or whatever, and just sort of, you know, that's the natural instinct. So actually, to go against the natural instinct, to actually go with it, is a lot tougher, a lot harder.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, David, Anita actually turned me onto this show. I'm curious if you've seen it. Have you seen the Ricky Gervais show, Afterlife?
I confess I have not.
What? Oh my gosh!
No, I know. No, purely because I'm not the biggest Ricky Gervais fan, and I thought, the last thing I can do is probably watch him dealing with a subject like this. Now, I've heard lots of stuff, and I know season 2 has just been released, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'll give it a go, and try it. But yeah, I've liked some of his comedy stuff, and I guess for me, hold on, this is a really sensitive, serious subject matter. I'm not so sure I could deal with that. But you know, I will give it a try. I guess the only thing, what have I been watched a few episodes on? It was on, because strangely enough, quite a few little programs like this are coming out. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was on Facebook Watch.
Oh yeah. I don't know what it's called either, but I know what it. I know people have talked about it. So here's something interesting about the Afterlife show. So, of all of the shows that deal with grief, I feel like he did the best job of actually portraying grief, because although I just started season 2 and I might have to change my opinion after watching the first episode, because it was not taken lightly. He was not one of those, like, because I feel like usually in the grief shows they spend like 2 episodes being sad and then they like find their new person and it's all good, you know what I'm saying? And it was not like that. Like, he was in a bad place for the entire season, and I kind of appreciated that. I mean, like, he felt suicidal, he was doing things that were really terrible and mean, but it's just because he was destroyed. So I think you should watch it and see if you can get over your hatred of Ricky Gervais.
I wouldn't say it's hatred, but yeah. Yeah, no, and I suppose even now, I mean, I'm in a different place probably from when it first came out. So, you know, I mean, I don't know what it's like for you two, but there were programs that I used to watch, or we used to watch together, which actually, I couldn't watch them for a while. And I've sort of gradually you know, got back to that. So I guess maybe with Afterlife, I can be at a point now where, okay, I can take it and sort of not sort of be full of bitterness and anger or whatever, the way it's been done. But I know with funny enough, listened to some previous episodes of your podcast with people you've got on, and it brings me into, I suppose, a bit of theory that I like, because there's various grief models out there. But you're saying about the, you know, behaving this way or behaving that way. There's a dual process model, which was a link when you were posting stuff on the Facebook.
We're so bad.
Once, when we did it once.
I did sort of post link, but this, you know, I know was it Lindsay was on last week? I can't remember the lady who was on last week, but she thought, you know, you've mentioned about the 5 stages.
The therapist, Christy, the therapist. Yeah.
But you mentioned about the 5 stages, and yeah, I mean, that I could go on about that, you know, because that was Well, that was more about sort of people who were in hospices who were diagnosed, and that was their reaction, which then sort of seemed to be used by therapists to, oh, it seems to sort of parallel with some reactions from grief. So I'm not a huge fan of that, and it's not a linear process, and I prefer myself. There's, if you don't mind going into a little bit of theory here, there's the dual process model, which was done by Strober and Schucht or whatever they were. I think it was Dutch. I think they were. And basically, what they're saying is, and I like it because it seems to sort of, for me, and a lot of other people, resonate with how you feel when you switch between feeling this way or that way. So it's basically the model represents sort of the going back and forth between loss orientation tasks, which are around about the grief itself and the sort of the crying and the the strong desire to curl up in bed and not do anything and not to carry forward, and then the restoration orientation tasks, which is stuff like, okay, I'm going to try and move forward. I'm going to try and learn how to, I don't know, cook if I've never cooked before because my spouse done that, or how to manage the family bills or whatever it is. So the theory is that people oscillate between those two different types of tasks, and where the problem lies is where you sometimes you get the friction between the two, that you think, oh, I should be doing this when I feel like doing that, so I should be trying to do these new things, but actually I just feel like I'm just want to stay in bed all day, and that friction, that you can almost beat yourself up. That I like that, because it sort of gets that bit where, I can feel okay 1 minute, I can feel better, there's a bit of future, and then next minute actually I'm feeling back in it again. I quite like that sort of model rather than, say, the 5 stages. So with that bit with Ricky, I mean, I guess where you have that the character sort of can feel elements of positivity, maybe, shall we say, or hope or whatever, and then next minute is actually really angry and bitter or whatever. I guess that's sort of the oscillation between the different ways. It's not sort of set linear where you go from this step to that step, and once you've done, they're all done and you're moving forward. But the other one I like is the grow around your grief model, where actually it's not necessarily that you basically, if you imagine a circle, and you basically fill a circle in black, that's sort of where you are when you're grief, when you've lost your parent, sister, whatever it may be, your bereavement, and that's everything that you experience around that. And people used to sort of think that over a period of time, the blackness in that circle would shrink as your grief would shrink and would lessen. But actually, this lady who was a counsellor in New Zealand came up with this idea that actually what you do is you grow around it. So over a period of time, it's actually not that the grief itself shrinks. It stays probably about the same, but you grow around it. So your life expands. That circle, the edge of that circle starts to expand, and you get more of a gap of separation between your grief and the rest of your the other parts of your life. So new things grow, new experiences, and as you move forward, your grief is still there, and sometimes it might get a little bit bigger, maybe in around anniversaries or that, but it stays pretty constant. But it's the fact that you grow around it, so that you appear to be over it to other people. I hate that word, over it, but you appear to be over it to them, but actually it's still there. It always will be there. Because the love's always still there. It's just that you've learned to live with it, to manage with it, and hopefully over time be a bit more comfortable, I think, is probably in managing it. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah, there's no secret that we are not fans of the 5 stages of grief, right? And I like that idea. One time I tried to draw what I felt like as a person after experiencing Jason's death, and it was like I was a circle, and then there was a hole cut out of the middle of me. But then I added kind of a pointy bits on the edge of me, things that I had been forced to grow out of my normal circle, and they weren't pretty necessarily, but they would not have grown had I not experienced that. So you saying that kind of reminded me of that drawing I did of how I felt about myself, even though I've never heard of that theory, but I kind of like that theory. I want to ask you just one question as we're kind of trying to finish up our interview with you, David. How long has it been since your wife died?
It will be 4 years in a couple of weeks.
4 years, okay. So what things have you done to try and by the way, what's your wife's name?
Bev. Or Beverly.
What?
Oh, Bev with a V. What things have you done to try and keep your son's memories of Beverly intact and strong?
Keep her in conversation. It's that sort of continuing bonds thing. So, she is talked about. There's the picture still in the house up and around, and we funny enough, it was just the other day, we had one of those moments where we were talking about something, and we both at the same time had one of those quiet moments where we know what the other one's thinking, and we're thinking about Bev, and it's like sort of we then talk about that. So for me, it's been talking about her, keeping her present in that respect. Doing things, I suppose, that I've, with the, maybe not so many cakes or cupcakes or whatever that I sort of bake as what Bev would have done, but I've tried to do the elements of that sometimes with him. We go to places that, we would go to before as a family, certainly, birthdays, and stuff like that, or whatever. I've always done this thing where we would go out for somebody's birthday in memory of them, whether it was my dad's birthday or my wife's birthday or whatever. We do something to do that, and sort of just keeping her present, talking about memories, talking about stuff. And I suppose, I guess things for me is with the future stuff. So we try and think, okay, would this be a place that, she would have liked? Or, would this has been, we like going, well, can't do it at the moment, but we like going to new coffee shops. And sort of, oh, yes, Mommy would really like this place, because she liked, this type of coffee, or she liked this type of cake, and they've got those cakes on sale, whatever. So, for me, it's just keeping her present in that way.
Now, was Bev buried or cremated? And if she was buried, do you visit her gravesite?
She was cremated. So
Okay.
she's here in the living room with me right now. Yeah.
Hey, hi, Bev.
I haven't got around to getting the ashes interred. We have there's a cemetery in Watford that they have a plot aside for cremation, so you can get a headstone and stuff like that. And I've talked about it, but I just haven't got around to doing it as yet. And funny enough, I was wanting to get around to doing it again at the start of this year, and then the coronavirus sort of crept into the way of that and stopped that. So yeah,
stupid coronavirus is ruining everything.
And that in itself it's interesting, because a lot of people are sort of experiencing major losses now because of that, and everybody's now sort of experiencing grief in different ways than, say, just perhaps through bereavements through coronavirus. Just grieving the loss of normality.
Is there anything else, David, that you want to say that we didn't get to?
I guess the only other thing I suppose I would say was that I suppose afterwards I did go back to work for a while, but I probably the year after quit my job because my heart just wasn't in it anymore. I had no interest in doing it, and what I'm now doing around some part-time work is studying to be a counselor. So that's what I've decided now. Right, I want to go back in to do that, and I'd like to, fingers crossed, whatever, is to sort of be able to be employed in the charity sector, in the what do you call it, non-profit sector, I think is what you say, in the States, and sort of be able to use my business skills that I've got over the 20 years that I was working at a telecoms company, and be able to use my counselling skills. But it is blooming hard work because I'm trying to get my assignment done at the moment, and trying to do that, and homeschooling and everything else is not easy.
Plus, now you're going to be up really late tonight because you were doing a podcast with two people from far, far away. So, sorry about that. Okay, David, I have one final question for you. Okay, and it's not the question that you think it's going to be. Are you ready? Can you please say the sentence, "How now, brown cow"?
Okay. Hi night, brown cow.
That's my favorite part of your area of the world's accent. So I just needed that for my own benefit. Thank you.
I have a certain set of skills, skills that I've acquired over.
You and old Uncle Liam. He's a widower. You guys should hang out.
Yeah.
You can talk to each other.
I was, interesting trivia fact, at the school I went to, the secondary school that I went to, his sister taught maths, so I knew his Liam Neeson's sister. She was a teacher at my school.
So what does she say about Liam? Can she hook you up so you guys can have like a widower club? Because you need more widowers to hang out with, right? You can't just hang out with widows. That's like super boring. It's a lot of estrogen.
Or even, it would be nice just to be in that sort of clique of people who can afford things.
He could help you. Hey, Anita and I are widow wives. You guys could be widower husbands, and he could support you, and you could still live your separate lives.
That sounds like a great plan. Liam, call us.
Or in the old days when people would hire companions for travel, like an older woman would hire like a young travel companion. Like maybe you could start that up, but with two widowers.
I could just be a pack mule. I'll carry bags or whatever,
Yeah, be his assistant. Come on, Liam. We believe in you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we've received some emails from you in the past, and we really appreciate your insightful questions and comments. So thank you again.
And thanks for staying up super late and drinking all the caffeine so you could chat with us.
And everybody, please send your flour and your yeast to David in Watford. And don't forget our contest. Whichever country comes out on top, Anita will play your national anthem on the clarinet. Don't forget. It's very important.
It's gonna be amazing.
I have to say, I think the British national anthem will probably be the easiest one for you to play.
Okay. Come on, Britain. Come on, UK. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this podcast and getting to know an international friend who's a widower. Join us next time. I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
I'm David.
We're just a couple of young widows and a widower trying to figure out widower we do now. See, the lag is so hard, right? So hard.
Annoying.
Yay. This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
Tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, you might need another option, and you just want your phone to work, you want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks. And so you don't have to pay extra for that. And you still get great service.
Yep. Anita and I have traveled all over and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it. And my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan, and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company, and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys, such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process of all time. Again, that's
trymintmobile.com/WWDN.